All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to have you joining us today as we talk about email marketing in 2023. So first, just want to say a little bit of logistics. So first, we start out this recording or this webinar is being recorded and will be made available to you in the audience after the call. And I'm looking forward to having any questions, of course, being asked during the end. Um, yes, so being asked at the end, just as a reminder, please mute yourselves. If you have any questions that come up during the call, please feel free to put them in the chat window. We'll be addressing those at the end. And with that, I will get going. So first and foremost, just a brief introduction to us as a company. So we're Email Broadcast, we're a full service email marketing company. Really what we try to do is help our customers stand out from an ocean of mediocrity and allowing customers to focus on what they know best, which is their customers. And in that mission, part of that is delivering solutions to help address outreach. So helping our clients find new customers that don't know them yet, nurturing clients that are potential customers that are already in the funnel, as well as building loyalty to increase customer satisfaction, repeat sales, and upselling. And so with that, let's get a little bit into the webinar. So today's agenda, I would like to talk a little bit about the brief history of email marketing, some of the trends that are happening in 2023, and how you can use those and leverage those. What are some of the things that you want to be implementing now? A little bit of look at all of the buzz around AI in the content generation space. And finally, our recommendations. And again, happy to answer any questions. If we don't get a chance to today, I'll of course do them offline and make them available to everyone. So a little bit of fun. When I was putting this together, it actually made me smile a few times and also gave me a little bit of pause when I'm like, wow, that was long ago. But to start, email, the first email, which was a bit of a surprise to me, but the first email was sent in 1971. I mean, we're talking now, that's what, 50 years almost. Of course, that wasn't anything like we know it today, but technically that would have been the first one. The smiley emojicon, which we all use, and especially in our texting and social media lives, that was invented at Carnegie Mellon in 1982. World Wide Web, 1989. Hotmail, so if you remember that, still many people are using Hotmail addresses, etc. But that was bought by Microsoft in 1997. The movie, Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, You Got Mail, a little bit of just humor towards email, 1998. Then we start getting into some of the little bit more specifics. So canned spam, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, because that is, of course, a very important thing, especially for our US customers. But canned spam was introduced or signed into act by George Bush at the time in 2003. DKIM, which is one of the important pieces of email deliverability, was adopted in 2007. Gmail, which is, of course, the #1 most popular email platform today. That was introduced in 2007. SPF, another very important thing in the email deliverability, became a standard in 2008. And 2008 was the first time that a US president really adopted email marketing as a major part of their election campaign. That was Barack Obama, and targeting a specific user group. So a little bit of fun, but also kind of puts into perspective, the different things and also some of the answers why certain things are different. Just as an example on that, we say Gmail or Google has a more evolved method of, spam blocking and, email checking. That was primarily because it's much younger than Microsoft, as you see, which was built off of Hotmail, a decade earlier. And those are some of the intricacies of email, but it kind of also tells you why those things happen the way they do. So first and foremost, I wanted to kind of differentiate, and it's really important because I still find a lot of, people treat these the same. But there are two general types of email that I would just say out there. There's warm email when it comes, and this is where you have established a relationship with a customer. So they've opted into your newsletter. They've signed up for you sending them information. And then there's what you'd call cold email. Cold email is when you have no existing relationship with a customer. And because of that, if the easiest way for me to explain it is cold email is more like sales. So you're really reaching out and you're cold calling, where warm email is more about marketing. And that difference, if you will, really goes into how you approach it, how you send it, and how you operationalize it within your email marketing campaign. So email marketing, of course, can be a very powerful tool, but some of the basics and fundamentals are compliance. And there's two different types of compliance. So there is state, federal, government compliance, and then there is complying with the email service providers out there. So from a state and federal perspective, in the US, CAN spam is the primary one. There's some in California as well, a dedicated one. And then when we talk about the EU, they have a very specific the EU Data Privacy Act, which has very similar implications. To be honest, it's a much more thorough privacy than what is implemented in the US, but they're all basically built around the same premise. So CAN spam, which was introduced, as I mentioned, in 2003, kind of really put in place in 2004 timeframe, essentially states that you cannot send messages to someone that does not have a legitimate reason for receiving it. And what that means is, especially in a B2B world, is, if you're going to be advertising or pitching a product or some kind of solution to them, they should have a legitimate need for that solution. And if they don't, it falls out of compliance with the CAN Spam Act. Now, let's say that has a number of tiers, but most and foremost is a very strict financial penalty for non-compliance, which is also why I generally advise, and as a company, we really deal with B2B. So businesses sending information to businesses, because it really does check that box. There are, of course, a number of other regulations or rules that are around it, but that's usually the most important one, at least from my perspective. And then when we look at the email service providers, you have, these are the Gmails, the Outlooks, the Yahoos, the Hotmails, etc. These companies have built very elaborate systems to make sure that they're delivering the right email to their customers. And so they created filters themselves that basically look for quote unquote spam. So the first level is just putting it in your junk folder. You might see Gmail today has a promotion tab where they automatically filter things which are more marketing based into that tab. And that's kind of at the top level. At the highest level, they may even you may have a block added organization. So when you're dealing with B2B, you might be sending to a large company, and they may have an initial filter at the top level that just basically blocks you. And then ultimately, you step one level up there. If you create a bad reputation by sending emails to the wrong people, you can get it blocked completely. So then the address will be blacklisted. And essentially then everything that you're sending is going to have a high likelihood of landing in the spam folder. So all of these really are important, and both sides of this compliance is critical to making sure that you actually get your message to your customers in the way that has them take action, or really follow your call to action. Next, I just wanted to, after that, talk a little bit about the email marketing trends in 2023, and, just a couple of quick snippets on how you should adopt them and really be looking at it. So I kind of focused in on 4 main buckets, and then I'll give you a couple of additional ones after that. So the first one is just generally, I see a raising of the bar across the industry. And what does that mean? So, sending a mediocre marketing email or an okay email has become easier and easier. A lot of this to do is because of the email service platforms like MailChimp, etc., creating default templates and making it relatively easy for novices to get in there and send an email to a list of customers. And this is done because it's also at a lower cost than it has been in the past, but these pre-built templates are generally well formatted and easy to use. But the implication of that is it is now much harder for you to differentiate yourselves to your clients by just looking professional, because people are more and more companies are looking professional by default. And this leads to the need for content, personalization, and richer email templates, which are much more responsive to the different needs of the end user, all to be incorporated to help you stand out more. Where just in the past, you compare it to a amateur email to a good email, there was a world of difference. That's just getting smaller and smaller from a look and feel perspective. The next one that's really important is dark mode. So dark mode, most of us are using it now, but this is a relatively new thing when it comes to apps. And so that means, whether that's your Gmail, that's your Apple, that's your Microsoft, that's desktop, that's mobile, all of these are having different dark mode implementations. And many studies are showing that already users have adopted about 50%, or even in some cases, I've seen studies showing up to 80% of users have adopted a adopted the dark mode in one way or the other. And if you look at this, the main reason why is because it's easier on users' eyes. I mean, that's why I use it, especially at night. It's much easier for me to digest in dark mode than it is light mode. And with that, the way that dark mode works is very specific to the app itself. And because of that, it means no consistent standards, not well documented, and it is changing all the time. And so my recommendation is that, many default templates today don't work well in dark mode. But what you'll also need and find is once you find something that is working or create it, tomorrow it may actually stop working. And so having your team or a team of coders, so someone who understands how to build templates, specifically the HTML underneath and the CSS, so the style sheets, and your graphic designers involved and continuously reviewing and checking just for dark mode compliance, because this could be affecting, as I said, up to 50% of your intended audience. Next, just wanted to talk a little bit about mobile. So, mobile is a primary medium today, and you need to treat it as such. I mean, it's fairly straightforward in that understanding. Generally we see that about 46% that was of emails are opened on mobile devices. Of course, in a B2B environment, it's a little bit less, but that is a good guideline. What we also see is that 1 in 5 email campaigns is not optimized for mobile. And just a quick study, and this one was done by MailChimp, is that launching a mobile responsive email campaign, so one that is really responsive, can increase your clicks by up to 15%. So that is quite significant when you think of the scale that this is now talking about. So again, the takeaway is develop your email campaigns for both mobile and desktop. I would do those at the same time and generally have a template that supports and is responsive to both environments. And this is not your default template. This is generally an advanced template that you want to build. And the last one in this kind of section is personalization. So, this specifically is personalization is talking more towards cold emails, which is, again, more of the sales types emails. But, this is really important when you want to create a connection. So first, personalization means you're sending it and creating a one-to-one communication between the sender and the receiver. It's not something where they look in there and say, yes, I'm part of a broadcast, I'm part of a newsletter. It is, this is Jake reaching out to me, trying to add value. And because of that, you need to put in things there that are beyond what almost everyone is doing today. I mean, you probably get them as well, but putting a person's name, a reference to their business, and saying, hey, I follow you on LinkedIn, interesting post, that's not good enough anymore. Everyone is using these, and it actually, in my mind, when I receive these types of emails, the first thing I do is think, okay, this is just a robot or a machine sending me something. And that's, of course, not what you want to prescribe, because that immediately puts up the defenses of the recipient. Similar to this is the account-based strategies. So, Especially in a B2B environment, you're going to be sending your message to multiple people within the same organization. And you need to be extra careful when doing this to create the right expectations. So, of course, I put a really simple, basic design here, but and with some nice Looney Tune references. But if you're addressing the same company at the same time, but with multiple people, generally in a B2B, it's not a single person or a single decision maker in your buying process. So they might share, hey, I just got this email from so and so. Sounds interesting. What do you think? Right? And they forward that to them. And the worst thing that you could happen is say, hey, yeah, I just received that email, an hour ago. That's happened to me multiple times in my past. That again completely destroys your credibility when creating that personalization. So when looking at your B2B strategy for account-based marketing, or just when you're sending to larger groups, keep this in mind. So of course, recognize that you're sending to a business, and which is a group of people, and encourage them and expect that they're going to be sharing the emails amongst each other. So spread out your engagement and also react at a business or account level. If you start going to that next level of discussion on how do we do something for that business, don't at the same time be sending out emails to similar people within the organization asking if they're interested in that service. It gets conflicting messages, and it doesn't give the right perception that you're trying to build. Now, another just couple of examples of best practices. So, one of the things that's changed, and this was as of 21, but of course, just starting to be introduced and being adopted more and more. But Apple's changed their privacy protection impact. And what this means is they're auto loading a lot of the things, or specifically images, in the background before actually you open them. And so what does this mean? So the tracking pixel, which tracks opens, so this is how all of the opens and how people know that an email was opened, that is no longer valid because Apple would have automatically done it on their server before the end user even receives the email. What this means is that the opens is not valid for those customers. It means that your open rates are probably going up, which is an unreliable metric. It means your click to open rates, so that KPI will decrease, but it's again unreliable. And the automatic, if you're using automation where you're automatically sending follow-up emails to people who don't open your emails, you're essentially eliminating that entire workflow step because the triggers won't work that you've established. And now there are a number of tactics you can do to change these things. For example, using a time-based trigger versus a response-based trigger. But those things really need to matter now. Now, of course, it's important to keep in mind that not everyone is using Apple Mail. And so while a lot of people are using Apple devices, they still might be using Gmail or Outlook or these other providers on that apps on that phone or on those devices. But depending on, part of your audience is going to fall in that category. And so you, of course, want to be careful of that. Okay? And depending on which audience you're targeting, this might be more prevalent. This also might be less prevalent. So for example, in a B2B environment, it's probably much less. In a B2C environment, is going to be more, just because we know about the number of Apple devices out there, the percentage of it, and Apple Mail is by default used on them. So a lot of people just by nature use Apple Mail. Then, the other one I wanted to mention just in terms of good practice was Gmail. So Gmail will clip long emails. And what that means is they won't completely load the email. They'll basically put a button up that says, show more. So when the user gets down to a certain level, they will have to click or take action to see the rest of the email. By nature, a lot of end users or recipients won't actually click that button. And if they don't click that button, it has a number of implications that you have to be watch out for. First, if you have a tracking pixel or some of the other tags in there that you use for your analytics, it won't actually show up unless they push that button. So by nature, you might see drop in open rates and response just because of that. And probably more dangerous is if you put your call to actions below that clipping point. If you do, then you may be missing a large segment of your audience not actually seeing that call to action because it's been completely missed. So two things that you really want to watch out for on that one. And specifically, I see a lot of this happening when it's in the e-commerce segment, because a lot of times individuals are putting their portfolio on there, which makes a lot of sense. But because there's an image and it just starts taking up a lot of screen size, it gets clipped. And those are something you just really need to be careful of. And the other just basic one is sending long emails is not a best practice. So there are of course reasons, and there's good, and there's all these other things, but really be careful about sending it because of these reasons. So now just quickly going to jump on to some KPIs, a little bit of talk about these. So, in email, there's essentially two different types of KPIs that you want to be watching. So there's the leading indicators and there's the lagging indicators. Leading indicators are deliverability, opens, clicks, unsubscribes, positive replies. These are things that happen in real time, relatively early in the process of sending them out and driving connections. It's important because of that real-time nature. It allows you to make frequent adjustments and monitor things how they're going. But at the same time, it's very easy to lose the big picture when you're looking at these leading indicators. And probably for some of us, it's also hard to communicate to the executives or finance or the business side, because these things don't naturally translate. How many opens as a percentage or how many clicks doesn't necessarily translate in many people's mind into how much revenue is this contributing to. So, our recommendation, of course, is use these. Test often, test small changes, and dedicate serious time. That has to be there. But to map these indicators into lagging indicators or into business results to help communicate the value of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and showing that it's contributing to the organization. On the flip side is those lagging indicators, such as appointments booked, orders, new customers, repeat customers. This is ultimately how a marketing program is judged. Is it successful or not? It is the basis for ROI. But at the same time, it doesn't allow you to help optimize your programs. And what traditionally this does is it creates a very easy for someone to give up quickly, because they basically say, oh, it didn't generate the number of appointments that I wanted, so this isn't working. Let's try something else. That's a very common statement that comes from the business side of the house, not the marketing side. And inevitably, this causes you or your organization to lose out on doing this right, because there could have been many fundamentals that were preventing that success. And until you really go through it and test it, you don't actually know. And I believe firmly, and I think we see that email is one of the number one, or is the number one, say, marketing tool out there in many ways. So not doing it because of something like this, quick to judge, you're actually losing opportunity, and that's probably costing the organization business. So my recommendation is, use these lagging indicators to judge success, but you need to manage the leading indicators to make sure that you're giving it the time, the energy, and the focus, as well as the optimization to truly get success. So if you're an organization that says, I'm not interested, or an individual says, I'm not interested in those lagging indicator or leading indicators to manage that and do all of the work that's required, I strongly recommend you get someone to do that for you, whether that's yourselves or someone outside your agency or your company to help you. It really makes sense. So just a couple more things as we wrap up. I wanted a little bit about the email service platforms. So, this is your MailChimp, your Klaviyo, AdWeber, ActiveCampaign, Constant Contact, etc. The good is it's enabling everyone, as earlier mentioned, to send better looking marketing emails to a large list of prospective customers. That was a challenge for a long time, but that challenge, is gotten much lower. The bad is that it makes it easier for everyone, so that it makes it does not, so it makes it easier for everyone. But the bad is it doesn't necessarily make creating content any easier. In fact, it potentially makes it harder because you need more compelling content. So the other couple of things on this one, setup is still technical, so you do need some technical expertise to do it to help you. And these email service platforms, they're notorious for not necessarily helping you in the most effective way. So an email response after 48 hours, for example, is not the most customer-friendly service. If you've ever been in that situation. Then the real ugly is, yes, everybody's gotten a little bit better. You need to spend more time trying to differentiate yourself than you may have had to in the past. And content is still really that area to do it. So speaking of content, let's go into the latest buzz that's going around the industry, which is this, art generative AI. So, Chat GPT, Jasper, Google Bard, there's a ton of them out there. All of these are what come from a class called generative AI, which is basically a segment of artificial intelligence where it uses or generates content or data for specific applications. So, these are really good tools for, and they're getting better. So I'm going to say really good, but there's still a lot of evolution that needs in them for driving productivity gains when it comes to content marketing and content creation. On the other end, I don't see these replacing jobs. The reason is, it's manyfold and a little bit deeper conversations, but primarily what I see is they make productivity improvements. So what you could say is they're going to create, people are going to become more productive. Therefore, there's going to create excess capacity. That might be a logical argument. But the reason is that I say it doesn't replace jobs is, a lot of effort is still required to leverage them. Context, audience, experience, personality, being on brand are not easy attributes to contribute. And these are the things where you need to, and the higher level things that the content creators are going to spend more effort on, while some of the other things may be automated for them. In a way I look at this is just like when Word or Google Docs or generally anything now, has spell check and grammar check and all these other things for me. Made my life easier. Doesn't necessarily mean that I didn't need to write the sentence or that I didn't need to understand what message I'm trying to put together to communicate to the recipient of the content that I'm creating. So again, it will raise the bar, making it harder to differentiate yourself. And I say that a little bit differently as well, in the sense that this isn't just email. This primarily, in my mind, is going to be in the SEO space. So when you talk about blog creation and content for web, there's going to be a lot more of that out there. Again, just makes it harder to do what you've been doing in the past and get the same results. So in kind of closing, my recommendations, where you should focus your effort to stay on the top of your email marketing game, content, that is not changing. And if you don't get this right, you're going to waste a lot of time and effort by doing many other things. So, this is something that, I never can underestimate. It might sound easy to write an email, but for all of us who are, in this space, probably all of you on the call, you understand it's not about writing a few words. It's about writing a few words that gets results. And that last piece is where it takes time, energy, because to get results, you have to add value to your end user. And if they see that value, can feel that value, it resonates with them, they'll take action. If you're just sending them content that doesn't have those attributes, it's a waste of time. Continuous improvement. So, I'm a big believer in this, but, spend a lot of time testing, optimizing, retesting. And this is from various aspects, because even what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. So I talked about why in dark modes this could cause problems, but also your audience changes. So what the trends are, what triggers them is going to change from time to time. And finally, doing something is a thing of the past. And I say that with a lot of importance, but platforms and tools have made things easier. And so what that meant is the people who figured out in the past and were just getting things done, which was a good way of standing out, is no longer applicable. You need to up your game continuously to stay ahead of this because the bar has been riven. All right, and with that, I'll pause to see if there's any questions. We're coming up to a little bit over the time lot, so maybe I'll just kind of skip right in to saying that, first, I'm really happy that you joined us for our webinar. We'll be making this available offline. If you have any questions, now or in the future, we're always here and willing to address them. And again, reminder, I'm email marketing is one of the most powerful tools out there at your disposal when done right. And if you're looking for help with it, we would be more than happy to participate. With that, I wish everyone a great rest of your afternoon or mornings, and we will talk to you later.